Happy Monday. It is Sunday night for me. I'm recording this on my Samsung Q9U, a phenomenal dynamic microphone that I have picked up recently that I am still trying to get the most out of and adjusting myself and my podcasting, because no matter what microphone you get, unless you spend $400 or $500 on it, it's really dependent on your voice. Some voices just work better with some microphones. And, it's especially with the cheaper ones out there, that just tends to be the case, and you can always fix things in post-production, but not everybody has the ability, the knowledge, and the know-how to do that. Today on fucking Mondays, I want to take a moment to visit on Behind the Scenes at Youngblood Podcast. Behind the Scenes at Youngblood Podcast. Youngblood Podcast is really something that has always kept it as simple as possible, but there is a lot I have learned in the 4 years of hosting a podcast. One of the most important parts about your podcast, I always have a script, just to keep things flowing naturally. Once you might get nervous or lose track of what you're saying, you can always turn back to the script and keep it flowing with a good amount of energy. That comes from somebody who never did a script originally. I always freestyled my podcasts. You want to write down what you're doing. You want to make sure that you're somewhat organized. You can always go back in post-production and edit a bunch of things together. But at the end of the day, you really want to get your podcast in one run, the best you can. One run, because you won't always be able to do that. And the less editing you have to put on yourself in the end of the episode, the better. So, it is what it is. You're only going to be able to get away from editing so much. I am glad now that I have the ability to edit and get things on a level that I want them to be on, because before I would just have to record the whole episode and hope and pray that I did it perfect. And that's really hard when you have guests. It's extremely hard when you're hosting somebody, when their time is at stake, man. It's really tough. So moving forward here, I want to talk a little bit about the recording equipment I use. It's anything crazy. You can keep it very, very, very simple. I prefer to use a soundboard when I use microphones like this. Right now, I'm plugged straight into the inverter, into my computer. With this microphone, it tends to do okay. Other microphones, if you're using different styles of microphones and you're using, a dynamic and a condenser, and you have different styles of people that are all talking with different kinds of voices, I recommend getting a soundboard. I have one. It works wonders when you're doing sound check and you have different voices, man. Like, that's just one thing I really can't stress enough, is soundboards help a ton. You can always go back and fix it. You have computers, computer programs that have the capability of acting as a soundboard and doing this, but personally, I prefer the analog way of just having it in front of you. It makes it very, very, very self-explanatory. It's right in front of you. It's right in front of your face. You can't miss it. So always stick towards, in my opinion, a soundboard when hosting a podcast. I have certain tips that I have developed for myself to make my job a little bit easier over time. There we go. I have certain things that I've done over time to make my job a little bit easier as a podcaster, and those are all things that you learn yourself with time. There's really no way to make this all happen in one day. You're going to need to just grind out some time, learn the basics, get the first episode out. Really, really, really push yourself to record when you have time. Even without other obligations, a podcast is a full-time job. It takes, if you want to do a podcast weekly, bi-weekly, obviously the less you release episodes and the less you put on your plate as far as making it video or having a YouTube or making shorts and stuff like that, it is a full-time job. You can easily fill up your day with 8 hours by doing this. There's not a question about it. It's a matter of time organization. You really got to organize your time. When I have full days of content creation and podcasting and recording, I genuinely go on to ChatGPT and I put in what all I have to do that day and what my time frame is like. And I have it write me a schedule for myself, because I suck at writing my own schedule and following it. But when I have that schedule written out for me, that's just kind of a genuine or a general consensus of what I need to get done that day, it helps me stay on task so much easier. It really does. I cannot explain to you how much doing schedules on through AI has made my day more organized, and something that being somebody who excuse me, being somebody who struggled with writing schedules and being organized in that way growing up, I've noticed that having it done for me by just telling it what I need to do for the day is very, very, very convenient. You know, I do tend to like Google. Google has their own version of ChatGPT or Chat AI, and it's been pretty good for me so far. I do like it. When you are hosting a podcast with a guest, you always want to make sure that you give them enough time to come over early, at least an hour for sound check, especially if you have multiple guests. Give them 2 hours to get comfortable. If they've never been to your house before, or your studio, and they've never been in a podcast, and your job is to make them comfortable. Your job is to get them as comfortable as possible, because once they get onto the mic, they're going to be the furthest version of themselves, the more uncomfortable they are. You know, and you want to bring the most genuine person that they are on your show, because yeah, this is a talk show. This is something that it can be very nerve-wracking, can be very, you put on lights, you put on cameras in their face, you start asking them questions, and they get nervous, and it's natural, you know? So when you have a guest, make sure you really focus on making them as comfortable as possible. Always do that. Make your guest as comfortable as possible. Do not force questions. Do not introduce them to the camera like, welcome to the show, and then start asking them questions. The way I like to do it is I genuinely sit them down, I'll get them comfy, and put them on the mic, start the sound check, continue setting up my cameras, and while they're on sound check with the mic and the headphones on, and they're sitting there talking and chit-chatting with you while you're doing your cameras, that's when I hit record on the audio and just kind of let them start chit-chatting and stuff like that, and then I'll get the cameras all set up, and whatever, how many angles I have, 1 or 2 or 3, you know, I'll set those up all separately and combine them post-production, you know. But I never tell my guest when I hit the record button. That is the biggest tip that I can give you as a guest hosted, or as a podcast host who hosts guests on almost every episode. You always want to give them the element of comfort. Okay, invite them to your home, make them feel at home the best you can. Give them every option as far as, you know, drinks, sparkling water, you know, whatever you can do to get them comfortable. The more comfortable, the better the show. So some of the process that I use in editing and post-production is really dependent on what platform that I'm putting my show on. It all kind of comes in correlation with each other. You know, if I'm doing just a Podbean recording or just a single recording on YouTube for a tutorial video, everything kind of changes depending on what I'm doing. For the most part, the YouTube tends to be the final product. I always record the show in video format, then combine the video format with the audio and post it onto YouTube. And from there, that's when the YouTube has all the cuts and the final edits and how I want the show to be structured as far as what's made it in entirely at the end. So that's when I will convert it back into an MP3 file and post it onto audio platforms such as Apple and Spotify. So it's really simple when it comes down to that. And I record all of my podcasts in 1080p and then upscale them to 4K using Adobe. So I don't know. Personally, in my opinion, you don't need to have anything more than a 1080p camera to keep up with today's standards and to really record something decent. You know, obviously having 4K is better. And you can get 4K with simply using your iPhone. There's lots of ways to do that. I've spoken before on my podcast about using an iPhone is not something I recommend when you're first starting out into this video editing stuff. If you don't use Mac. If you use Mac, by all means, use your iPhone to record. That's an awesome way to go. I don't use Mac. I am not an Apple guy. I have always been a PC guy. So I have my preferences. And those are definitely using a camcorder. Using a camcorder, I prefer Sony. Sony's awesome, and that's just my preference. You know, there's awesome brands out there. There's GoPro, there's Sony, there's Canon. And you can get them for really an affordable price. As long as you know how to kind of get that video off of an SD card and edit it in post-production, you can do a lot with it. And that's the main thing that I'm trying to push here, is not breaking the bank as a podcaster right now. These Monday podcasts leaning towards tips and tricks from me as a podcast producer and a video producer here in Colorado Springs. So take it as you. There's also other people on YouTube, and there's also fantastic resources out there for you to learn how to do this and for you to get involved in your community and to learn how to be a podcaster and to learn how to be a producer. It's super, super fun. Super fun. Now, I wouldn't say simple. You can make it simple. You can make it simple on yourself. But, you know, if you really want to get into it, it can get complicated very fast. And my biggest advice to you is to simplify things by reducing cameras, reducing the amount of recordings. You know, start alone. Do it by yourself. Do it into your phone speaker and just see how you like it. Practice, practice, practice. Don't be afraid to do 20 recordings and not post them. You know, I have hours, days, weeks of footage that haven't made it onto anything, you know, and most of it just gets deleted. A lot of the time it isn't something that I thought would be beneficial or worth posting, but you know, the practice recording itself was enough to me to feel satisfied in the time that I put into it. So never be afraid to just practice, record, you know, do 100 hours of recording if you need to. Do 100 hours of recording before you ever get the chance to post one if you're that uncomfortable with posting it, you know. But my advice is just post it, get it out there, start it. You'll feel good about it. You'll be proud of yourself in the end. And this has been another episode of fucking Monday's Youngblood Podcast with Casey Young, your host. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm out here trying my very best to bring you guys the best content that I can as often as I can. So please take a moment to follow Youngblood Podcast on any platform. You go look, you'll find me. We're on Patreon. We're on Venmo. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you enjoy your podcasts, we're located. So please don't be afraid to go on there and leave me a rating, leave me a like, a review, whatever you feel, whatever you have time for. It helps me out a metric ton. So again, guys, have a fantastic Monday and keep it going. Get that shit started, make that money, have a great day. Checking out from Youngblood Podcast.